expecting to go in 2020. And then, of course, Israel locked down. They didn't have a tourist for 2 years. And for those that think tourism is the major economic factor in Israel, guess again, they still wouldn't be crawling out of a severe depression if that were true. Tourism used to be way at the top of the list. It's still on the list, but it's so far down that they were able to endure those 2 years. About the only ones that were squawking were the hotel owners and the tour companies, the bus drivers, this kind of thing. Maybe some restaurants. But other than that, the country did fine. And we had a wonderful time this year. We'll have an even better time next year. And I do have some flyers on the table. We changed the dates a little bit. Normally I go like the last week of April into the first week of May. And we were scheduled to go April 24th to May 4th. But my guide is coming out of retirement. And she may not be the best guide in all of Israel, but all the other guides wish they were Susan Marcus. And she just does a phenomenal job. And I said, are you really going to be able to handle it? And she said, so instead of leaving at 8 o'clock, we'll leave at 8:30. We'll take it a little easier. But she'll do it. She just makes the tours that much better. So I changed my dates to accommodate her. And then I'm really glad I did, because our daughter and son-in-law just told us that probably April 28th, we're getting our second grandbaby. And so I'm glad that I'll be home and not in Israel for that event. So it works out. Anyway, I do have some flyers. Pick one up, and all my contact info is on the back. The daily itinerary is on the back, so you can see the sites that we intend to see. But I need to kind of prod you a little bit, because if you're interested in going, I only have like 4 seats left. And they're first come, first serve basis. So as long as you get your deposit to me, it's like right away. I was going to say as soon as possible. Some people hear that, well, I've got a month. Like right away. I had a couple go home from church last Sunday morning and send in their deposit Sunday afternoon. So that's been happening. So I only have 4 seats left. When they're gone, they're gone. And then you have to run alongside the bus, and you come home singing, I ran today where Jesus walked. Not as much fun as it sounds. But Pastor is going, and Haley, I just want to make sure I got her name right. And so come with them, and let's enjoy this time together. I promise it'll be a life-changing event. It'll be the trip of a lifetime. So, that's what you had there. Perfect. So, anyhow, make sure that if you have any question about it, give me a call. Give me a call. Well, you can after I leave, but while I'm here today, stop me in between services and ask me any question that you have about it, okay? All right. What we want to do in this hour is a question and answer, and I want to focus it on Israel, the Middle East situation, prophecy, witnessing to Jewish people. Questions you haven't found that answer that satisfies. Now, I always say, if you've asked a dozen people the same question, and they're all giving you the same answer, and they weren't all schooled by the same guy, can they all be wrong? I had one guy yell out, yes. So there are skeptics everywhere. But at some point, at some point, you just have to accept the answer for what the answer is. It's like my Tante Giddle used to say, if 2 people say you're sick, lie down. So let me start this by setting the stage for it. It's been 15 years ago at least Ariel Sharon, then Prime Minister of Israel, was sitting down peace talks with Yasser Arafat. Before they began, Sharon stood up, said, before we start, I have a statement to make. 3,000 years ago, our people came into the land. They settled the land, built their homes, their businesses, put their lives together. Things were going along just fine. Suddenly, they discovered things were missing from their homes, from their businesses. They investigated this. They searched it out. They discovered the Palestinians were stealing their belongings. Arafat jumped up and said, wait. There were no Palestinians here 3,000 years ago. Sharon said, fine. Now we can begin. So you just need the right perspective, okay? Now, it's always tough to get this started. No one wants to be the first one to ask that first question, climb out on that limb, have everybody cut it off behind him. But I promise, the question you're a little timid about asking, there are 2, 3 others here that just wish they had the chutzpah. So you'll be helping them. Plus, once you start hearing these, your mind starts working. Oh, yeah, what about this one? And then it's hard to get it stopped when we need to. So who'd be the first brave soul? First question. Yes, sir. Well, can you hear the question? If you don't, I figure if I hear it, everybody must have, and that's not always true. So wave me down if you don't hear the question. This is in response to the Abraham Accords. Somebody called it the Abrahamic Covenant, and I'm going, no, it really doesn't go back that far. But the Abraham Accords. And it's been difficult to hold them together, the Abraham Accords, because once this administration, I'm going to be kind, once this administration came into power, they don't care about it. And they're not backing it. So these Arab nations are a little uneasy about entering into this accord or maintaining this accord. So some have dropped out. And Saudi Arabia was ready to sign on, fully sign on, until this. Dubai, United Arab Emirates, was the first that they opened up daily flights, commercial flights to Dubai. It was a huge thing. That had never happened in modern history. So, or in history period. So anyway, it's tenuous whether others are going to sign on to this or not. And we just have to wait and see. It takes strong support from our administration. They really don't have it right now. Yeah. Yeah, see, they're just not interested in strengthening those relationships, which is the only way to bring peace to that region. So everybody's got their agenda. And they're afraid that it will harm the Palestinian cause. Well, if the Arab nations aren't worried about it, well, where's the concern? And the Arab nations don't like the Palestinians. They threw them out. Every Arab nation in the world threw them out. And that's why they're where they are. And so, anyway, that's what we're left with. Good question, though. What else? Don't scratch your head. I'll think it's a question. Yes.
I've had multiple people comment to me or ask me about what is actually used, and is there any kind of change?
The red heifer is very important. It is a very specific sacrifice that's necessary to consecrate the priesthood and the temple to God. Which, when you go with me, and next year we should be able to get up on the Temple Mount. Pardon me, you will see that the Dome of the Rock is not over the Holy of Holies and not where the temple exactly stood and will stand again, because the temple has to line up with the eastern gate. And we see the eastern gate. The Dome of the Rock is here and it doesn't line up with it. They open the eastern gate. They build what looks like a pier halfway across the Kidron Valley. And at the end of that, they put an altar. And on that altar, they sacrifice the red heifer. The red heifer that they sacrifice can be no more than 3 years of age at that point, can never have whelped a calf, can never have borne a yoke, and has to be solid red. They open the eastern gate. They open the gates of the temple. They open the veil, exposing the Holy of Holies, so you have a clear line of sight from the Holy of Holies to this sacrifice. They take those ashes then, they mingle them with the ashes of the previous red heifer that they sacrificed, and which are mingled with the one prior to that, takes you all the way back to Aaron. And then they use this. Hebrews says, the ashes of the heifer sprinkling the unclean. That's what it's talking about. You'll hear that verse a little bit later this morning again. But this is the sacrifice that it's speaking of. Now, the important thing is the Talmud, the ancient rabbi's commentary on the scriptures, the Talmud tells us in Israel's history, she's had 9 red heifers. When the 10th red heifer appears, Messiah will come. Now, back in the late 90s, there was a part-time preacher, part-time cattleman from Mississippi. And he's reading the scriptures, knows Israel needs this red heifer. Goes to work on breeding, crossbreeding. He came up with documented evidence, 3 generations solid red heifers. Somehow he gets a hold of Rabbi Chaim Reichman, who heads the Temple Institute project. We'll take you there. The Temple Institute is where they are doing all the preparation for the next temple. And they, Rabbi Chaim Reichman came to his ranch, inspected the herd, approved them. And they were to have been transported, the entire herd, to Israel so they could perpetuate this breed. You can see it's been far more than 3 years since he inspected that herd initially. So they need to perpetuate the breed. So now I'm finding that there's another herd like this that they're transporting to Israel. And I figure, okay, 2's always better than 1. And it gives you the greater potential that when you need that red heifer, you'll have one. Now, somebody in Texas told me when this question came up years ago, well, we've had red heifers in Amarillo forever. I said, well, one of 2 things is true about those red heifers. Either those red heifers are not completely solid red, or Amarillo has them, not Israel. And so whatever the case, Israel hadn't had that red heifer. So this is why it's important, and it's a huge sign to my people, because whichever herd this comes from, this is the 10th red heifer. And it's a huge sign to my people, Messiah is about to come. Now that in a nutshell is the urgency of our ministry, because we know he's about to return. And in that difference, that's a huge difference, looking for his coming and looking for his return. And we need to get that understanding into the hearts of my people, as many as possible. So, what else? Yes? It's a great question. Genetic Levites. I've not had this question before in 26 years of doing this. It is. It's a great question. And I happen to have the answer. They are doing DNA testing. Ever since this red heifer, they're asking young couples to commit their baby boys to their care. They're going to raise them. I may cover some of this again tonight if I do that, the message I'm thinking about doing tonight. But they're going to raise these baby boys for the first 13 years of their life. They'll be on the second floor of their building. Their feet won't touch the earth, so they shouldn't be corrupted. You know, God cursed the ground for Adam's sake. So there's a corruption that can transfer because of that. So they want to protect them of that. And they're going to raise them to take their place as the high priest of Israel. And there are young couples already committing their baby boys to them for this purpose. And it's like a Hannah Samuel sort of thing. They have full visitation. They can come see Junior anytime they want. They can't take him home. Can't leave that building with them. So anyway, they have couples committing their baby boys for this purpose. So the question comes up, how do they know they have the right lineage? They're doing DNA testing. You've heard of DNA, right? It has other purposes than just to determine whether somebody is a criminal or not. They're doing, and by the way, you know, these genealogy tests, have you noticed everybody comes out with a certain percentage of Jewish in them? Have you noticed that? Everybody's trying to get into the act. That kind of makes it suspect to me. There's only 20 million of us in the world. How did we spread to 8 billion people on the planet? But anyhow, they are doing DNA testing. And through DNA testing, they have discovered, unique to those of the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe, on the Y chromosome that distinguishes the tribe of, distinguishes the male, there's a distinctive marker. And it appears nowhere but here. Isn't God cool? Don't tell me God doesn't understand science. Scientists are a little verklempt with God, but God fully understands science. So because of this, they're able to narrow down and distinguish that lineage. And in training and raising up the Levitical priesthood and the high priesthood, they're certain that they're in the right lineage. That's a good question. What else? Yes.
There's a couple of mosques that disappeared again.
Oh, you mean on the Temple Mount? They need to disappear. I like that. Well, one of them's not a mosque. The Dome of the Rock is not a mosque. It's a shrine. And the one on the very end, as we go up on the Temple Mount, we didn't go. And I hate that. Shira wouldn't take us up there. Susan, will you want to come again? I got some seats. So anyhow, on the far end of the temple is the Al-Aqsa, of the Temple Mount is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's a mosque. This one, the Dome of the Rock, is a shrine. But they do have to go. There's no question about it. When we were at the Temple Institute, they showed us, if you'll remember, something, and I went in 2019, I think it was, when I first saw this, and I asked the young lady guiding us through, I said, what is this? I've never seen this before. She said, it's a portable altar of sacrifice. When we get the order to rebuild, before we ever get the ground cleared, we can take that up there and begin to sacrifice. So there's no question that in Israel's mind, they are going to clear the ground on the Temple Mount surface. She told us two quick things. One, before we ever get the ground cleared, they're going to take those two down. And second, we can take this up there before we ever get that done and begin to sacrifice. Rebuilding the temple is all about reestablishing temple worship, and that's all about the sacrificial system. How are you going to sacrifice with the Dome of the Rock sitting in the Levitical courtyard? It's where it is. It's where the sacrifices took place. So it can't happen. Well, there was a thought that just ran right through my Swiss cheese brain. I actually had a fellow on my tour one time, and Rabbi Chaim Reichman, who heads the Temple Institute, when we were there, he happened to be there, and he spoke to our group. So this guy jumps up and he says, I heard that you have enough room to build the temple and leave the Dome of the Rock where it is. And there is enough room. And he fell down laughing. He said, every day I go up to the Temple Mount as a Jewish man. He's an Orthodox rabbi. And as a Jewish man, I pray. And my life is constantly a threat because of this and because of the work that I do with the Temple Institute. So I have to have armed bodyguards with me everywhere I go. And he's packing. And so he said, do you mean to tell me that all of a sudden Islam is going to allow us to build our temple and worship side by side with them? It's not going to happen. Besides, if they did this, all they're building is a shrine because there's no place to sacrifice. So it is going to go. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is going to go. So how do I think this is going to happen is the question, right? And the nice thing about it, there's nobody here that can prove me wrong. Like these sort of situations. But it makes sense to me. The rapture takes place. The Antichrist comes to power, who, by the way, is the embodiment of Satan himself. He's the devil incarnate on the earth. The first thing he does, he signs his 7-year peace accord with Israel. I think he drops the pen, looks at Israel, and tells them, tear down the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, build your temple. Who can argue with him? This man is in supreme world domination. What single gesture could he make that would cause the Jewish people of the world to bow to him as their Messiah without reservation? Look, no one's arguing with him. No one else has given us this authority. This must be Messiah. And then 3.5 years later, they find out how truly wrong they were. And it's such a crushing blow, it causes them to flee to the mountains. So I think it'll play out like that. And that's a scenario where these two buildings can come down without the risk of World War III. Because if we tried to take them down now, that's what we would have. We'd have a world war. So I think it'll play out like that. What if it took 3.5 years to get it built? Remember, they've got the portable altar of sacrifice, so they can be sacrificing while they're doing this. What if it took them 3.5 years? I don't think it will, but what if it took them 3.5 years to get the temple erected? And they have this grand celebration. Go back and read about Solomon's temple and the celebration that they had inaugurating that temple and dedicating it. Go back and read in the Maccabees after they purged and reconsecrated the temple after Antiochus Epiphanes and see the grand celebration that they had coming in. I mean, they decorated the temple. They put wreaths on the doors. I always like to say, for you that are a little squeamish about seeing Christmas decorations in the church. They decorated the temple. We can do it. So anyhow, and so if you have this massive celebration ready to inaugurate temple worship, which hadn't happened since 70 AD, and they come in there and find the Antichrist has already defiled it, that would be a crushing blow. Cause them to flee to the mountains. I think it could play out a lot like this. But that's just my warped thinking. Yeah. I hope it's we. I hope you're part of that. Yeah. Okay. This is another great question because it is a concern that people have, because very clearly the scriptures teach us during the millennial kingdom, the sacrifices are ongoing. Why do we need to do that if Jesus is present, ruling and reigning? And it's this right here. This do in remembrance of me. This is a piece of the sacrifice of Passover. And the lamb that was slain, whose blood then was applied, and then we come under the blood. You can't miss it. They had to go into the house. Had they sacrificed the lamb, the correct one, and applied the blood to the doorpost and lintel and slept outside, they'd have lost their firstborn son. They had to come into the house under the blood. So Jesus is the fulfillment of this. And that's why we observe the Lord's Supper, because it shows that in his death, burial, and resurrection, and the sacrifice that he made, we have the cleansing of our sin. We have a home in heaven for all of eternity, but we have, more importantly, a relationship with God the Father in the here and now. We miss that part too often. And we ignore that part in our personal walk way too much. We have this relationship with God the Father because of Jesus' sacrifice, okay? That's what the sacrifices in the millennial kingdom are all about. Reminding, you got to remember, there are lost people in the millennial kingdom. Who else are we going to be ruling and reigning over? I had a preacher friend in Snyder, Texas. He was born and raised in this little West Texas town. He's pastoring in this town. He pastored there till he went to heaven, and he would get up and preach and get on this topic, and he'd go, boy, during the millennium, when we rule and reign with Jesus, I want Snyder. You know, he was going to get some payback. And I said, nah, Snyder won't exist then. We'll all be over there. But anyhow, there are going to be lost people in the millennial kingdom. We know this because at the end of the millennial kingdom, the devil is loosed for a season, the Bible says. And he gathers up a group of people who rebel against Jesus on his throne, and then they're immediately cast into the lake of fire. You can't be part of that gathering that Satan gathers together to rebel against Jesus if you're saved. So there has to be lost people. So you have the sacrifices with Jesus there as the fulfillment of that sacrifice. It's a beautiful visual to remind everybody why it is that he gets to sit on that throne, why he's Lord and we're not. And I always think that there can be people who are saved, but, you know, I quit using the word Christian. Christian means Christ-like. We want to anoint somebody Christian the instant that they got saved. I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings here, but there's not one of us that the moment we got saved became Christ-like. If you need evidence of that, preacher, do I have my devotions in the morning or in the evening? Yes. In the morning, at noontime, and evening shalt thou hear my voice, O Lord my God. That's what David said. If we're Christ-like, why are we quibbling over and trying to make certain and get approval for spending the least amount of time with God every day that we can? When Jesus sought to spend as much time with the Father as he possibly could. So we didn't become Christ-like. That takes a life of growth. That's something called sanctification that we just don't hear an awful lot about these days. The disciples were not accused of being Christ-like for 20 years. And it was at Antioch. And the people went, "Oi, they're just like Christ," in the way that they lived their life and reacted and responded to circumstances. So you may have some believers there, that's entry level, who have spent no time with God, don't know anything about him. All they know is they have some fire insurance. They're saved. And that's it. And I'm afraid people spend so little time with God, they'll sit there and go, "Why does he get to sit on that throne? Do we have elections? Do I get a crack at this?" Because we don't spend any time with him. So there could be some weak ones there, but they won't follow the devil in rebellion against Christ if they're saved. So we know there are lost people there. The sacrifices are visual, a reminder of what Jesus, the cost that he paid, where the angels declare in Revelation, "Thou art worthy." Yes. No, I said the sacrifices, including all of them. It's my whole answer. All of the sacrifices are a visual, a reminder of what Jesus accomplished for us and why he's worthy. It's just a reminder. It's not for our redemption, it's a reminder. And I use that word wrong. It's not for our salvation. Does that help? Okay. Yes. Well, they could move into action as far as doing the sacrifices instantly, because they'll take the portable altar sacrifice up there and begin. They since the 6-Day War have been in 1967 have been training the Levitical priesthood. So they'll have the priesthood ready to go. And all they need is the authority. They have engaged the architect to draw the blueprints. And again, I'll get into a little more of this. I'm thinking I'll preach that message tonight. I'll get into a little more of this evening. But they have so much in place. They don't have everything that they need, but they have so much of the furnishings. When we take you to the Temple Institute, it'll just blow you away how far down the road they are on all of this. And it's a long, tedious project because they have to do deep research in the Talmud to make certain that everything that they make is exactly as the Talmud prescribes. See, the Torah gives us the big picture. The Talmud puts the details into view. And so when they made the temple menorah, the golden lampstand, they searched through the Talmudic writings to make certain that the one that they made was exactly as it was prescribed to be. And then they have to raise the funds for it. So it's costly and a lot of tedious research that goes into it. But they've got probably 90% of what they need. So they're so far down the road on this. All they really need is authority, and they'll move right into action. They won't need to form committees, and they won't need to have votes because they're not Baptists. So they'll just move. Yes. And it's solid gold. It is solid gold, yeah. And it stays out there 24/7. And it's been out there for several years like that. It is gutsy. I would have it inside the Temple Institute, where you can lock the doors and set the alarms and put guards. It's out there, and you notice there were no guards guarding it. So they have some way, though, that they're securing it. There's got to be some way that if that case that it's in is violated, it's got to set off alarms. But you also see how crowded it is there, and anybody trying to make off with it would have a hard time. Plus, there are Israeli soldiers that are stationed right there in that try not to say courtyard, but in that area. And so and you have to come and remember we had to go through security to access that area. I'm talking about the entire in the old city part by the Western Wall and all of that, where all of this is. And that's controlled by military. So it's going to be very difficult for others to get into. They feel pretty secure because the perimeter is guarded with Israeli soldiers. Say again? Oh, several million. When by today's value, it's probably much, much more than when they made it. But it was several. I mean, I'm not saying double digits, but it was high. They spent a lot of money on that thing. But it had to be made because the Pope didn't bring the original with him in 2000 when he visited Jerusalem. Everybody thought he would, but he didn't. We know Titus took it. It's etched in stone. And then when he said he was bringing a gift when he made this historic visit, everybody thought he was going to bring that with him, and he didn't. So that's when they made this new one. And it's been there ever since. You're right. It's me. I grew up in Detroit. And in my garage, I locked my vehicle. And then the garage door comes down, and it's with a rolling code thing. So it's locked up in my garage because I had in Detroit somebody get in the garage and tried to steal my car. So I see people I pastored in small towns, and I'd come into the church and parked outside. We were on the corner, and I'd walk by these vehicles in the summertime. The windows were down, and the keys were hanging in the ignition. That's how long ago this was. And that just got all over me. I mean, my car is parked on the side, locked up and the keys in my pocket, and these people, the windows, I just, I can't get over that. And then you're right. And then this multi-million-dollar precious item is just basically out there in the open for anybody to access. It's scary when you think about it. But yeah, and this year was interesting because it was the end of Ramadan, which was only important while we were really in Jerusalem, because that's where all that activity would be. That's why Shira didn't want to take us onto the Temple Mount, because its tensions run high during Ramadan. But anyhow, it was also the Holocaust Memorial. And you're supposed to, this is why you need to go on a trip like this with a Jewish person. Because we were up at Tel Dan, at the spot where Jeroboam had brought the second golden calf. And there's the relics of the pagan altar, the high place of worship there. So our group is over here, and right over here where this wall is another group. And at a certain time, the sirens would sound for 2 minutes. And that's in remembrance of the Holocaust victims. You're supposed to stand there silent for 2 minutes. And this tour leader over here is yakety, 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 and he's looking over his shoulder. This is bothering him. Yakety, blah, blah, and we're standing there silent, being respectful. And he's going, blah, blah, and he got louder and louder, and he never shut up. And I so desperately wanted to go and confront him. And when he got done, or when the siren stopped it, and he's looked so aggravated that it was taking his airtime away, you know. It was, people couldn't hear him over this, and it was really bugging him. You could tell. So when that was done, I just looked at my group and I said, this is why you need to come to Israel with a Jewish person. That's all I needed to say on that one. It's just the little things that make the difference. And he never knew what that siren was all about and couldn't have cared less. And his people missed an opportunity to pay some respect in that moment. So anyway, just a few plugs here and there. What else? Yes. It depends on where in Israel you are, just like in this country. Jerusalem is the epicenter. So in Jerusalem, you're going to find far more Hasidim, the ultra-Orthodox, and far more Orthodox. The conservative and Reform are still considered observant Jews. They didn't used to be. The Orthodox didn't believe they were Jewish because they'd walked away from the law of Moses for the most part. And for a while there, if you were conservative or Reform, you couldn't become a citizen in Israel. So you have to be Jewish, and they didn't consider them Jewish. They had been forced to change that. But the percentage is much higher of observant Jewish people in Jerusalem. Further away you get, the more that thins out. Just like here in New York City, 3 million Jewish people in that one city, 750,000 Orthodox and Hasidim in Brooklyn alone. It's huge. But the further you get away from that thins out. In Fort Worth, we don't have the Orthodox or the Hasidim. We have conservative and Reform. In the Metroplex, we have a very small Orthodox community. And it's so small that we don't really have a defined community that's Jewish, like most major metropolitan areas do. So it's the same way there, because 45 miles away in Tel Aviv, it's probably 90% secular. And so it just depends on where you are. Honestly, if you're going to be Orthodox or Hasidic, your first target is Jerusalem as far as where you're going to live, and then probably Tiberias. There's a very strong population there, and you probably saw it in the hotel on Friday evening. They fill the hotels. That way they don't have to cook, clean, or any of that, and their synagogue is in the hotel. So they're not going to violate the Sabbath day journey limitation. And they just get there before sundown on Friday, and they don't have to check out until sundown on Saturday, because the Sabbath won't end until then. And they fill up the dining rooms, and they're just having a great time. It's a celebratory kind of thing. And I think it's cool to see that over the years, how the little ones now are adults with their babies, and they branched off to their own tables and are carrying on this tradition in that way. So there are pockets, there are places like that where Orthodoxy thrives, and then there are places where it's just strictly secular. And you've got to remember, Israel is not a religious state, but a secular state. So, which is why the Hasidim don't believe it should exist. No Israel without Messiah. When Messiah comes, he'll establish Israel and be our king. So when Ahmad Binadab was talking about wiping Israel off the face of the earth, they said, good, shouldn't be here anyway. No Israel without Messiah. So, what else? Yes. Israel and Iran, you can't have a more tense situation. And we in this country need to wake up to it, because, for one thing, we're feeding Iran the ability to develop their nukes. I mean, Obama and Biden both are determined to just give them billions of our dollars. What do you think they're doing with it? Have you looked and seen whether the Iranian people living in Iran are any more prosperous because of all of this money we're dumping on them? No, it's going into their nuclear program. And they are very determined, and they have stated it, that their first target is Israel, the second target is America. America is the great devil, Israel's the little devil. And they're going after both of these devils. And yet we want to keep piling this money on them. Makes no sense. So it's very tense. I just read this week where Israel is planning to do some preemptive stuff, which changes their rules of engagement, because Israel's rules of engagement are never a first strike, only a response. But they came out I think this week is when it was, and they were determined to put a stop to Iran as far as nuclear armaments are concerned. What the world forgets, Israel has long been a nuclear power. They just don't brag about it. And they didn't get those nukes from us. They developed their own. So while Iran wants to be a nuclear power, Israel already is. So somebody needs to stop Iran before we have a nuclear complication that the world will have a very difficult time recovering from, if ever. So yeah, it's very tense, and every day it grows that much more that way. It's something. Yes.
All right, last question. You settled thousands of years of history. Where's the Ark of the Covenant?
Say again.
I said, for our last question, did you settle thousands of years of mystery and tell us where the Ark of the Covenant is?
Well, Rabbi Gorn and Rabbi Getz, who they're the ones that excavated what's called the Rabbi's Tunnel that we go into, and they did their surveying on the surface of the Temple Mount and determined where the Holy of Holies is. There's portico over this spot. And if the Dome of the Rock is here, it's over there. And so they determined this. Then they went 60 feet beneath and began to excavate. And they came to this spot where they broke through the wall. And they came to a chamber that stands 60 feet beneath the Holy of Holies. And in this chamber, they believed they found the Ark of the Covenant. Now, they've been interviewed about this, and I've got a video of that interview. And he's one of these rabbis, very arrogantly, I think, but he says, everybody knows where to look. All you had to do is read. Well, you have to read biblical Hebrew and be a Talmudic scholar. Other than that, it's a piece of baklava. So they walled it back up because they're not Levitical priests, and they have read the Old Testament. So they wouldn't touch the thing. It was covered, and they wouldn't even peek under the cover. And that's where they went and started the Temple Institute. But at this spot, you have Hasidic women all day long praying because they're as close as they can get to the most sacred thing on earth for the Jewish people. So according to Rabbi Gorn and Rabbi Getz, and you can do some interesting reading on this if you can find some books by Randall Price. In Search of Temple Treasures is one of them. And it has a companion video. And then there was another one along, I can't remember the other title, but these two books that deal with this, where he, and then one of them is where he interviews the rabbis that actually did this. Randall Price does his own digs over there in Israel, archaeological digs. So he's well studied and well versed in this and has great experience. Up until recently, I think he's out of San Marcos, Texas, but he was teaching at Liberty University, but I don't know if he still is. But you can look up Randall Price and maybe even find and get some of these books. I've read right through them like a hot knife going through butter. He writes really well. He doesn't speak all that well because he talks like this. He's not a captivating speaker, but his writing is captivating. And so you'll enjoy that and get a lot more of this information on this. So, yes, that was supposed to be the last question, but real quick. You mean while it was back in the Old Testament day? Well, the Levitical priests probably, I don't know. That's a question I've never. Maybe it had this ionized field around it because the same thing that would nail you if you touched it maybe kept dust off it. I don't know. That one, let's Google that one. who kept the dust off the Ark of the Covenant as they journeyed through the wilderness? That's a good question. With that, we'll close, all right? Father God, we love you. Thank you for the time together. Thank you for the questions. And I pray that the responses wouldn't just tickle our intellect, but break our heart for a people group so desperately in need of their knowing who their Messiah truly is. And I pray, Father, that you'll bless the services today. Let your name be glorified above all else. For it is in Jesus' name, for his sake, we ask it. Amen.